Are you tired of the cookie-cutter approach to education that's stuck in the last century? Are you seeking a win-win situation where your family thrives, your kid's education is revolutionary, and you still get to chase your own dreams? Welcome to Unschooled Unleashed. Unlock your child's genius. I'm your host, Matthew Jarecki, an unapologetic rebel dad and promoter of what many consider to be educational anarchy. You know the world isn't going to be won by those that just toe the line. It's the innovators, the visionaries, and the resilient spirits that are going to thrive. Our mission here is to forge those world changers within our very homes with less stress, energy, and time. Unschooled Unleashed starts now. Welcome back to Unschooled Unleashed. I'm your host, Matthew Jarecki, and today we're going to talk about how much math your kids need. We're going to dive into what I think they need to at least be a well-functioning member of society, and maybe areas of opportunity in which we should try and influence our kids to achieve to set them up for future success. So with that, let's dive in. Today we're going to talk about the minimum necessary math for a well-functioning member of society, meaning we're going to dive into what I think is the minimum necessary math that a child needs to be at least exposed to and understand in order to not limit their options for the future and set them up for success, hopefully. First, we're going to talk about why math is important in daily life. Now, for most of you, I probably don't have to say too much. You probably just inherently understand this, but there are some people who don't think math is that important, or that only knowing addition and subtraction, maybe some division and multiplication, is pretty much the limits. And I'm going to argue that you need to know a little bit more than that, but that would be a very low bar, and I think it's very achievable. Math is a skill essential for problem solving and critical thinking, and if we're trying to prepare critical thinkers and problem solvers of the future. And again, this is what I think as we look off into the future with AI and all the technology and all the things that humans could do in the future in conjunction with AI. The problem solvers, the ones who ask the right questions, I think are the ones that are going to be set up for success. The ones with the fundamental understanding of the way the world works, which is math. You know, that's what math is a numerical representation of how the world works. I think that's going to be critical to set them up for success. I think fluency in basic math ensures competency in everyday tasks as well. When we unschool, we focus on the very practical aspects of their education. And really they're just diving into whatever they're interested in, which makes it very, very practical because they can use it immediately. Some ways to incorporate math into your daily world if you're unschooling is, going over a budget. This is where it's important, managing your income and expenses effectively. And there's more, it's with baking, or cooking, or it's with understanding your investments. And I think this is all important stuff. And I would even argue that we need to go a step further to not only set them up for success in just managing their daily life, but also give them a core fundamental understanding beyond that. So that way they can, again, be problem solvers. So core math skills for daily life, I think, is where we start. Basic arithmetic is fundamental. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division are all absolutely necessary, in my opinion, to set someone up for success as an adult, meaning we should try and steer our children towards that. And if you understand what the type of unschooling that I advocate, it's called intentional unschooling, where we're going to allow the child to go lead the way as far as where they want to go. So it's child-led and interest-based. So whatever they're interested in and whatever they choose to do, we're going to support, but we're going to give them a 10 out of 10 support to allow them to do that. And the way we do that is give them the resources and the tools to be successful in whatever endeavor they go into. And when we define success, we define it as being able to learn. Okay? We also are going to give them a wide variety of exposure to different topics. And this is where this comes in. We want to at least expose them to the value of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division in the daily world. They need to see us using it, and this is arguably very, 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 very basic stuff that we need to at least steer them towards if we can. We're going to garner interest. We're going to point out the practical value. We can have them incorporated into their daily life so they get continued exposure. And ways we do that are they count their money. If they have a save jar, they can spend their money. Now they need to know addition and subtraction, multiplication, and division. Of course, that's going to help. And really the only time we've gotten into that is just having a fundamental understanding of how the world works and taking shortcuts. It's multiplication is addition on steroids and stuff like that. I think that beyond those basic arithmetics, or basic arithmetic, I should say, I think we need to go into geometry because it's very practical in the real world. This is understanding shapes, sizes, and spatial relationships. I think it's an essential for home projects or anything that you want to build. Maybe you like working with your hands. You really need to know a lot of geometry. It's also good for navigation, manipulating a spatial environment, like a furniture arrangement or something like that. I know that's kind of a stretch, but it's an example. We need to know basic geometry because, again, it's an understanding of the fundamental way the world works. Geometry explains the phenomenon of this relationship between the shapes of the world and how they interact. That's geometry, right? And it might be a very novice way to define it, but that's how I think of it. Moving on, we're starting to get into maybe a stretch for some of you, because I'm sure some people believe that that's probably where it needs to stop. Maybe even some think the basic arithmetic is where it stops. I think that the minimum necessary math for a well-functioning member of society in which where they aren't limited in their understanding of the world, by their understanding of the world, they need to know algebra. I think that's the minimum requirement. And to get them there, we need to know not necessarily everything before that, but I think these are the three things that we really need to make sure that we steer them towards if we have any way of any influence. Because algebra is everywhere if you want to use it. If you understand the concepts of it, and that's really what I want to get at. Algebraic concepts like variables and the equations are crucial for some real life applications, right? Some, if you're going to be a critical thinker and a problem solver, it is absolutely necessary. Okay. And again, that's my goal, is to prepare them for that. It helps in understanding and analyzing patterns, making predictions, solving complex problems, right? This is algebra. I know that I use it in Excel to calculate interest rates or savings, and I made this incredible Excel spreadsheet. I'm being very careful not to exaggerate here, but I probably spent 2,000 hours, which is basically a full-time job for 1 year, but I did it over many years, creating a spreadsheet that would make predictions about my finances. And I incorporated everything that I could think of into this one spreadsheet. And I used it to test it against what my financial advisor was telling me, which I actually proved was inaccurate. He was just teaching out of the book and he didn't know why. So I built the spreadsheet, and I had to learn Excel to be able to do this. But understanding algebra was the only way I could have done that. And I think that was not just taking someone's word for it about my money. That was a very, very important tool for me to be able to utilize. And then, of course, Excel is just math, and it's all about algebra and more if you want to use it that way. So again, kind of recapping the core math for daily life, I think we go with arithmetic, geometry, and algebra. Now, I don't think that's where I would want to stop if I have influence. Where I would want to go is probability and statistics. I think that's another one. I think those are crucial for making informed decision. Again, basics to survive and be a critical thinker. I think we need algebra. But if we want to make informed decisions, you might even argue that this is a core math skill for daily life to make informed decisions. I could go either way. Probability and statistics are on that list, I think, at least close. Statistics, understanding probability helps us in assessing risks and making decisions in uncertain situations. And I think an understanding that there is a way to predict this risk and future success in uncertainty is very helpful. I know I've used it just by using, like, if you think about like Occam's razor, it's really talking about probability of something happening. The most, in Occam razor states, and I'm going to put it in layman's terms, the most likely cause is probably the cause of something. If you see something, that kind of stands out and you're going, okay, what caused this? The most likely cause is what caused it. Well, you have to understand probability, or at least like a basic concept of it. You don't need to be able to do the math with it, but I think that basic understanding is very helpful. Learning probability is probably even more helpful because you really understand the way the world works. Statistics are used in analyzing data, making predictions and understanding trends. Again, to make informed decisions and prepare you for future success, especially if you want to go into a research field, you're going to have to understand this. And what are researchers? Critical thinkers, problem solvers, right? With running with my example with my Excel spreadsheet that I tested my financial advisor against, who I then, I'll just say it, I fired him. If you can't explain to me why you're telling me to invest in certain things outside of that's what the book tells you, that's what the credential states, that's it. That like the right answer on the test is this. If you can't explain it to me, then you are of no use to me. Because that's why I'm hiring someone. I could go over and make decisions on my own. I don't need you to tell me what the credential says. I could just Google that, how to invest my money in the allocations. But if you can explain it to me, that's what I hired you for. And when I can go over and build an Excel spreadsheet and prove that there are assumptions he made, my financial advisor made, that are wrong about my money, well, I think that's way more valuable. And I can do that if I understand probability and statistics. So it's very helpful for me. So I might even include that again under the core competencies, but that might be a stretch because very few people actually use even algebra in their daily life or in their as an adult. Moving on, some people may disagree with this one too, but I think that preparing them for future success, if you have any influence, I think you need to have a deeper understanding of physics. Physics explain the basic concepts of the everyday phenomenon of the world and technological advancements. If you understand physics, you can improve your analytical and logical thinking skills. It helps develop that, the understanding of the way the world works. When I say math is the way the world works, that's how we describe the way the world works. I'm literally talking about we can apply math to the phenomenons we see, and we call that physics. So I think that if you really want to prepare your children for future success, exposure to physics, at least the basic concepts of physics, is important. I know that even with my 8 and 10-year-old, I'm explaining physics concepts to them. So that way the concepts are deep-rooted in their brain and they can observe the world through that lens. And then we can dive into the math behind it later. But framing it in terms of math, I think, is helpful. I know in my career as a respiratory therapist, I have to have a deep understanding of fluid dynamics and how, in some engineering principles within a ventilator, which is life support. It helps you breathe when you are not breathing. That's how we keep you alive. So I run that in the hospital. And if I don't understand fluid dynamics of how gas moves, and I'm able to analyze the graphics on the screen, which is just a representation of the math, it's just plotting everything, I don't really understand what I'm doing. Okay? Like truly understand what I'm doing. And I used to be an educator for respiratory therapists, and I can tell you that the majority of them have a very weak understanding of this. In fact, I don't remember the exact percent, but the majority of these college grads that I used to train did not have an understanding of basic algebra when applied in the right circumstance, meaning they couldn't explain the physics behind the ventilator when I challenged them with the question. And I'm not knocking them. This was just to understand where we're at in the world. They keep on lowering educational standards, and that's a problem. They get rid of basic math in college degree requirements, and that's a problem. Or they try and incorporate it into another class, but it's a very light overview because they can only have so many credit hours, according to what the states now regulate with an associate's degree, which is the minimum degree necessary to practice as a respiratory therapist. And they're doing this with all associate programs. It's not just respiratory. We actually have to get an exemption here in the state of Ohio to be able to do this, to actually teach more physics. But their goal is to reduce it down into 2 years with the prereqs included, which I think is an issue because we get rid of the math and we just do a light overview and they really don't understand things. That's a major issue to me. So it's very important for my kids, at least to me, for my kids to understand physics. Because I think that understanding just opens up so many doors. Again, it's not necessary to function in the world, but to really have an understanding of how the world works, physics is it. That's literally the term we use describing how the world works. Moving on. Here's where, so if I just stopped right there and my kids got that education, like they understood all these concepts of that. And again, we can, they just understand the concepts. Maybe they could do some basic physics and probability and statistics, and that's all good. They've been exposed to it. When they get into college, they can take those classes again and get more information that maybe I'm giving them or that they've been exposed to. I never took a physics class before I got into college. That was my first physics class. I never took an advanced math until I got into college. I took remedial writing. Like basically I got out of high school. I don't want to use the word hate because I try not to use that word, but I despised it. They forced me to learn things I did not want to learn. Therefore I checked out because that was my way to cope with it. I was absolutely bored. I had no interest in some of the things they were trying to teach me. Therefore I tuned out as much as I could, got the minimum competency required to graduate, and I barely scratched, clawed my way through it. And then I got to college and I go, now I see the value in learning some of this stuff because I want to be a respiratory therapist. So I need to know the math behind stuff. Now I've actually got a purpose and I'm going to learn it. And I used college for all my remedial stuff. I used it for remedial writing because I actually was able to take, I don't know what they call it, College English 1, according to my assessment, whatever they do when you enter college and you get to take this little test to see where you're at. They recommended that college English. I took a step back because I'm like, I really want to understand this stuff to prepare me for that next class. So that's what I did. It's all offered in college. You can do this in an associate's program. Trust me, the high school graduates that are coming out don't understand this stuff, at least in the United States. And that's a very sad state. So moving on. Beyond the basics. I say all this to calm your fears about maybe I don't understand physics and I don't understand this and that. It's like, hey, there's tons of resources online to be able to explain this stuff and get the basic concepts. You don't need to necessarily do the math with them in some of the things like the physics or probability or statistics, but watching videos on explaining all this stuff can really help solidify that so they can take that, then learn the math, the actual math behind it, maybe on their own or later. Now, I happen to know some of this stuff, so I do it with them. But it would be challenging to do it without that. The option you have is learn it together. Try and learn it alongside them. If you've never been exposed to it and you're a smart adult, you can do this. Start with the basics and move your way up. And you can learn it with them. It might be actually a fun project for you and your kids to do together. All right, so back to beyond the basics. Again, if I got to that point where they learn physics, statistics, probability, basic arithmetic, and geometry, I'm kind of a happy guy. I feel like I did my job as a parent. Beneficial to know, pre-calculus and calculus. I've never taken a calculus class, yet I understand calculus concepts because I just self-taught. I had to learn this for some of the research that I was doing. And because I had to get on stage and explain this when and I had to explain it in the papers that I wrote that we publish in the abstracts and anything else. I had to be able to explain this, and I had to explain the tools that I used and why I used those tools and why this is an accurate representation of objective truth. Well, since I never took a calculus class, I had to get very, very, very well versed in it. And this is part of the whole strength of unschooling, is when you teach your kids to be able to teach themselves, and you love learning, and you know why you want to learn it, and you're interested in it, you just naturally are able to learn it. So I learned calculus pretty quick, at least some of the concepts that I needed to be able to explain, and why I used statistical methods I did. And this is why I say pre-calculus and calculus are beneficial, because if you can understand that stuff, again, it's above and beyond. They can always take it in college if they want to. Most people don't take calculus until college anyway, or the people who do take calculus in college are probably taking calculus in high school too, but it doesn't matter. You can get all that in college if you want to. You don't need to worry about that. But it's beneficial if you're able to go over it, because it gives you a deeper understanding of change, rates, complex systems, and really the way the real world works if you put it under a microscope and you try and describe it. You really need to have an understanding of calculus to analyze growth rates of investments or predicting populations or stuff like that. Interesting stuff. Moving on. So how do we teach this to be effective for learning? How do we teach these concepts? Well, we got to focus on the understanding of concepts over memorization. Now, there are some things that you need to memorize, but if you make it fun, you tend to remember stuff. Make it fun. The multiplication table, you're going to have to memorize to make math easy. Make it a game. Do something. I don't know. Experiment. What is your kid attracted to? If they like making it fun, if they like competition, if they like go where they naturally go, and it'll be fun for them. A deep understanding, though, of these concepts outside of the memorization portion, a deep understanding of these concepts ensures a long-term retention, and they're able to apply it later. That's why I focus on concepts over and over and over again. They're able to do a lot of mental math. They don't like writing math. I'd prefer them to learn the mental math first. It helps to explain it and do complex problems if they're able to write it, though. But I love that they just look at an algebra problem and they're able to tell me the answer by maneuvering the numbers in their head. But I want them to be able to write it, because otherwise you limit yourself. I do encourage my children to explore math through real-life examples and practical application as much as I can. So we look at fractions and we talk about that. We look at multiplication. We talk about all these types of things, and I try and point it out in real life. I encourage them to follow their interest, but I try and garner that interest along the way. I download apps that help them learn this stuff. I know my I can't remember the name of the one. It'll come to me. I'm sorry, guys. There's some really cool apps that help not just kids with math, but adults with math. And I think that's cool to download these apps that allow them to learn these advanced topics, because sometimes I get over and go to start writing stuff down and they're able to know the answer because they already understand the concepts. And I'm like, where'd you learn that? They're like, oh, that app. I avoid forcing them to learn any topics that I'm not interested in. That's forcing them makes them hate the topic. At least that's what it did with me. And I think I think that probably happened with you with anything you were forced to do they had no interest in. So let's not force them. Let's try and make it interesting for them. I like to have them try and work it out in their head first to solidify the concepts in their head. And that really makes them think, right? Getting it out of your head and putting it on paper helps you do the complex math, but you still have to have that basic understanding and be able to maneuver numbers in your head to be able to do math, right? So I focus on the mental math and the cognitive abilities for problem solving first, then to do the advanced stuff, we write it down. So I do teach them how to write it down. Moving on. So what are the roles of parents in math education? Well, support without pressure. Provide the tools, resources, encouragement for that self-directed learning. This could be, again, in the form of apps, games, puzzles, garnering interest through pointing it out in real life, what they could do with it. Be available to help out and allow them to grow, which means allow them to struggle with something that's a growth opportunity, and find solutions independently. You'd be surprised what they come up with. Promote a positive attitude towards math, that math is going to set them up for success in the future. That math is just a way in which to solve problems. And celebrate when they do solve that problem. It builds confidence. It gives them motivation that they can tackle hard things because math is intimidating even when you unschool. Celebrate it. This is going to give you a little bit of encouragement. Understand that the bar is low compared to current high school graduates. Despite the math policy that your local school might have, despite taking this algebra geometry that all these high schoolers are required to take, they still struggle with basic math in adulthood. In fact, a national survey found that 82% of adults couldn't compute the cost of a carpet when told its dimensions and square yard price. This is according to nia.org. I'll put a link in the description. But this is I think it's the National Education Association. I think that's what that stands for, if I remember right. And that was what they reported out. Think about that. They can't do basic calculations. We need to ensure basic math skills are mastered, and this can set our kids up for success. Again, the bar is low, guys. In fact, that same study that I referenced, it's called "How Much Math Is Too Much." It came out in 2016 by Cindy Long. It says, quote, "And though most of us have taken these courses," meaning geometry and algebra and geometry and algebra, as requirements for high school graduation, a national survey found, let me back up, that's the wrong one. According to, again, the same article is referencing this. According to Andrew Hacker, who they're quoting, who teaches political science and mathematics at Queens College and is the author of Math, Myth, and Other STEM Delusions, not many use algebra or geometry in their daily lives. He estimates about 5% of people. So even if you don't get algebra or geometry in there, only 5% of people are using this in their adult life, is according to what his survey found, what he says. The bar is really low, guys. So I think that us just even focusing in on this, teaching the fundamental concepts, is going to set them up for success. And I think we'll end with that. So we'll end today's episode. So stay curious, stay unschooled, and stay away from the algebra nightmares. Very relevant to this episode. We'll catch you in the next episode. So here's where we roll up our sleeves and bring out the big guns. If you support our mission, then please leave a review. On Unschooled Unleashed, we are talking about using a radical approach to education in today's world, and the more 5-star reviews we have, the more people will feel comfortable with the ideas, strategies, and principles we discuss. It gives legitimacy to our message, and the podcast's algorithm prioritizes us so we can reach more people. You may even have your 5-star review read on our podcast. Before I let you go, I have to pause and say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Your presence here is the fuel that ignites this movement. I am incredibly moved that you trust in us enough to click play. You, my friends, are the caped heroes in this story, the guardians of your family's learning journey, and a beacon of hope for your community. Be bold. Do what you think is best for you and your family. Thanks again for tuning in and taking this courageous leap outside of the box for this educational revolution. Welcome to the front line.